Hello everybody. Today I'll be demoing a beginner's guide to modern web development using Vue. To get started, here is an overview of the demo's content structure. Project scaffolding using NPM, which saves us setup time and provide us with ready-to-go configurations. Core concepts like reactivity, declarative templates, and Vue directives. Development tools such as Volar for syntax highlighting and with Vue for component navigation and element inspection. And also routing using Vue's official router and Pinya, which is a state management library for Vue. Before we get into the details, let's start with a background. What exactly is Vue? Vue was introduced in February 2014 by a developer named Evan You, who at the time wanted to create a framework that was simpler and more approachable than others. It's a front-end JavaScript framework, which means it helps us build user interfaces for the web. What makes it special is that it's both beginner-friendly and powerful enough for large-scale apps. So it's designed to grow with you as your project and skills grow. Lastly, it's also known for being declarative and reactive. For starters, Vue introduces the idea of single file component, or SFC, as we can see in this image over here. In essence, it is the .vue abbreviation in files, which we can find over here as an example. And I'd like you to take note of the three following features. The script block with a setup keyword, which allows for JavaScript logic. The template block, which declaratively defines the UI. And the style block with a scope keyword, which allows for component-specific styling. Now there are two main ways to write Vue components. We have the Options API, as we can see over here as an example, and the Composition API. In this demo, we'll focus on the Composition API, which is an example over here, mainly for its simplicity and cleaner syntax. That means less boilerplate code. Notice that in the Options API, there is a need for an object of options, that being data and methods. But essentially, both API should function the same. So what makes this simple counter example reactive? In line 5, we use the ref method provided by Vue to create a reactive value called count. That means Vue will track this value 0 and automatically update any element in the template that uses it. And since count is a ref, if we want to utilize it within the script block, we access its value using count.value. However, in the template block, Vue automatically unwraps the value for any ref, and you can just do a double bracket surrounding the reactive value. And this allows us to serve it as an HTML content. Moreover, also in line 19, we're using the @click keyword, which binds a function, that being increment, to a click event. It's essentially a shorthand for the Vue directive v-on, shortened to the @ symbol, as we can see here in the documentation. And we will touch on Vue directives later in the demo. Okay, now that we've covered the basics, let's move on to how we can start developing using Vue. To get started, ensure that you have npm installed on your machine using npm ---- version. And if you see our version number, that means you have npm installed. If not, just a quick Google search should do the job. Assuming you have npm, we can run npm create Vue at latest. And this will scaffold your Vue project. We'll call it tech demo over here. Just follow the prompts, arrow keys to navigate, and space to select, space. We'll select JSX, router, Pinya, and prettier if you want, just for readability, and enter to confirm. Now that we've scaffolded our project, we'll navigate to our tech demo directory, and we'll do npm install. While we wait for npm installation to be finished, we'll do a quick run through to what the npm create view at latest command did. We can see that in the source folder, project folders are neatly organized, each with a specific purpose. Components folder holds reusable .view files for our UI elements. Router folder contains view router setup and route definitions. Stores folder is used for our state management logic. Here we're using Pinia. In our views folder, which contains page level components that are rendered based on the current route. And if we go back to our router folder, here we see that in the route about, we render the component about view.view. And now for the two important parts of this project, scaffolded project, we have app.view, which is the root component that serves as the main layout and entry point for the app structure. And finally, we have main.js, which is the main entry point for where view is initialized and the app is mounted. Now that the npm installation is done, we can run npm run dev to start the development server and view the view components that were scaffolded using Vite. So just doing O plus enter should open this in the browser. Congrats, you did it. You've successfully created a project with Vite plus Vue 3. In this section of the demo, we'll be focusing on tools. You might have seen previously that in our .view files, we did have our tags highlighted. What we can do is we install an extension. So we just search for Volar or Vue Official, which has Volar. And if we install it, this should allow our .view files to have syntax highlighting, which makes it easier for readability. Another development tool I'd like to highlight are Vue's built-in development tools. If we open our Vue app in the development server via npm run dev, which I've already done, you might notice a small V-shaped logo at the bottom of your application. This is part of Vue's built-in dev tools, and it's very useful during development, and I'll be explaining both to you. Here, we have a radar-like tiger icon called the component inspector, and it highlights the actual part of the DOM being rendered and tells you which component is responsible for it. And it's very powerful because you can find exactly where to make changes in your code. As a demonstration, I can say change, and it's changed into a different text. And another tool that I'd like to highlight is the Component Navigator. It lets you inspect and navigate your component tree in a hierarchical way. So if we go to components, here we see app has hello world, router link, and router link. Router view serves home view. In this demo, you'll mainly be working with pages, which is where our roots are, and components, as we have already shown, router, and finally Pinia, which we haven't configured yet. So how exactly does the Vue router work? These are the four concepts that we should know to get started, and I'd like to highlight router view and router link first using our built-in Vue dev tools. So if I go to our app, and if you don't remember, it's just this small V-shaped logo over here. And here we have our router link and router view. So router link allows us to navigate between routes using the to prop, as we can see over here, to. It works just like an anchor tag, but with Vue's reactivity. So that means it updates the view without reloading the page. And the router view component acts as a placeholder. It's where the component for the currently active route will be rendered. So currently we have home view rendered. So if we just navigate to about, it'll replace the rendered component into about view. Now to tackle creating the router instance and registering the router plugin, there are two key files that we should know of. The index.js within the router folder and main.js. Creating the router instance is as easy as calling create router function. Within it, we have the props history and roots. Don't worry about history too much, but essentially just use create web history if you're making a web application. For our roots, we can define it within this roots prop where we map the URL path to our components. Components can be loaded eagerly by defining component imports at the top of the file, or lazily using the import function, which is the syntax right here. In large-scale apps, it improves performance by reducing the initial load time. After we have done creating our router instance, we can go to main.js, which is within the source folder, and register our router to our app. Okay, now let's apply all of these concepts by adding a route to display our counter component as we have defined over here. First, we define the new route inside the router instance within the router folder, router instance, and then a new route inside the routes options. So we just add the URL path / counter and a component that we want to render, counter view.view. We created this page level component in the views folder, which acts as a container for our counter component and serve as the destination for the counter route within index.js. Finally, we'll add a router link with a to prop pointing to the URL path as defined in the router instance. We can do it in app.view, but if you don't really know where it is, we can use our tools. Go over here, component navigator. Here we can see router links do reside in the app, and if we want to find it, we'll just go click over here with our element inspector. Here I've already added the router link, so let's just uncomment that. Save this one and also save this one to see the changes, and we'll go back to our app. We can see that we've successfully added a route to our counter component. Now let's take a look at how Pinya works. Just like view router, we first configure main.js to use Pinya, import create Pinya from Pinya, and then we do app.use create Pinya, calling this function over here. Next, we define a store using the define store function, so that is within stores folder, counter.js, define store from Pinya. It's important that we give the store a unique ID or name. This is used internally by Pinya to register and reference the store. Inside the store, we use the composition API to define our reactive state. For example, a count, a derived value double count, and our function increment. So why do we use computed over here? Well, it's basically a function that lets us create a reactive value that's based on another reactive state, that is count. This means anytime count changes, double count automatically updates. To make these properties and methods usable outside the store, like in our counter component, we need to return them. Return count, double count, and increment. And anything returned from the store can be accessed using the dot notation, counter.double count, counter.count. But before that, we must call the use counter store function to allow our counter component to access the counter store instance as we have defined in the stores folder. And just for demonstration, count is 0, double count is reflected. But let's say we don't do computed, uncomment this, reload, now double count is not reflected. And we'll just go back to our previous state. Let's say we don't return double count and reload. Here we see double count is not being shown. So it's important that we do return the reactive states that we are using. That is all for the demo, and thank you for listening.